The rain beat down mercilessly on the Pacific coast that October afternoon. Gabriel Martinez adjusted the hood of his worn jacket as he organized the fishing nets on his father's small boat. At 18, his brown eyes already bore the maturity of someone who knew life's adversities well. The rough sea and cloudy sky seemed to mirror the turbulence in his own heart. Worried about the hospital bills piling up at home? Just one more hour, he muttered to himself, checking the last few moorings. His job as a fisherman barely covered the family's basic expenses, let alone his father's treatment. The image of Mr. Ricardo Martinez, once a strong and vibrant man, now languishing in a hospital bed, weighed heavily on his mind. It was then that a crashing sound cut through the air, overlapping with the roar of the storm. Gabriel looked up in time to see a black Mercedes skidding along the coastal road above. The vehicle spun violently, breaking through the protection of the road and plunging into the rough waters a few meters ahead. Without a second's hesitation, Gabriel jumped out of the boat. Years of experience at sea had taught him that every second was precious in situations like this. He swam hard through the raging waves, ignoring the cold that penetrated his bones. When he reached the rapidly sinking car, he saw through the fogged-up window a pregnant woman, unconscious behind the wheel. Panic threatened to overwhelm him when he realized that the doors were locked. With a strength born of desperation, Gabriel grabbed a small anchor that he always carried with him and struck the glass repeatedly until it broke. The icy water quickly flooded into the vehicle as he struggled to unfasten the woman's seatbelt. "Please hold on tight," he whispered, noticing her prominent pregnant belly. With one last tug, he managed to free the driver. The extra weight of the pregnancy made the rescue even more challenging, but Gabriel would not allow fatigue to overcome him. He swam back to the surface with all the strength he could muster, holding the woman's head above water. On the beach, a small crowd was already forming, and sirens were sounding in the distance. Gabriel dragged the unconscious woman onto the sand and immediately checked her vital signs. To his relief, she began to cough, expelling salt water. "The baby," were her first broken words. "Calm down, ma'am," Gabriel reassured her, holding her hand. "The ambulance is coming. It's going to be all right." The paramedics arrived within minutes, which seemed like an eternity. While they were preparing the woman for transport, a man in an elegant suit came running up, his face marked with terror. "Laura! My God, Laura!" The man, who Gabriel would later discover was Eduardo Torres, knelt down beside his wife, tears streaming down his usually composed face. His eyes met Gabriel's, still soaked and shivering from the cold. You saved her?" Gabriel just nodded, suddenly aware of his simple, threadbare clothes. Eduardo stood up, still holding his wife's hand as the paramedics placed her on the stretcher. "What's your name, boy?" "Gabriel Martinez, sir." "Gabriel, you didn't just save my wife, you saved my son too. How can I thank you?" Before Gabriel could answer, another paramedic approached, insisting that he too needed to be examined. The adrenaline was starting to subside, and the young fisherman felt the weight of what he had just done. As he was being taken to the ambulance, Gabriel took one last look at the rough sea, where the luxury Mercedes had disappeared. He didn't know it yet, but that moment of courage would change not only the lives of the Torres family, but also the fate of his own family. At the hospital, hours later, Gabriel refused the blanket offered by the nurse, anxious to get home. His mother must have been worried, and his younger siblings, Miguel and Sofia, needed dinner. That's when Eduardo Torres entered the waiting room, his expensive suit now creased after hours of anguish. "Gabriel," he called, his voice heavy with emotion. "Laura is stable. The baby too. The doctors say that without your speed." He paused, swallowing. "I want to reward you. Tell me what you need. Anything." Gabriel hesitated. His eyes wandered down the hospital corridor, stopping momentarily in the direction of the room where his own father was battling a devastating illness. The offer was tempting, but his pride fought against the need. "Mr. Torres," he began, choosing his words carefully, "I didn't save your wife expecting a reward. I did what anyone would do." Eduardo smiled sadly. "But not everyone would, Gabriel. And you risked your life. Please, let me help in some way." The young fisherman closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of his exhausted mother after working double shifts, of his brothers wearing patched school uniforms, and of his father, who desperately needed treatment that the family couldn't afford. "Actually," he finally said, his voice low but firm, "there is something you could do for me. The first chapter ends here, setting up the crucial event that triggers the whole story and introducing the main characters. I'd like you to assess whether the tone and development are in line with your expectations before continuing with the next chapters. The hospital room where Laura Torres lay contrasted dramatically with the public ward where Gabriel's father was hospitalized. Walls in soft tones, elegant furniture, and a privileged view of the city created an atmosphere of comfort that seemed to belong to another world. Gabriel, still wearing his simple as dry clothes, felt out of place as he followed Eduardo down the corridor. "Gabriel, I want you to meet Laura properly," Eduardo said, opening the bedroom door. "She insisted on seeing you as soon as she woke up." Laura was sitting up in bed, her face pale but serene. Despite her fright, she maintained a graceful posture, her hands resting protectively on her 6-month-old belly. At the sight of Gabriel, her eyes filled with tears. "So you're my guardian angel," she smiled, extending a hand towards him. "Please, come here." Gabriel approached timidly, conscious of every step. Laura held his hand between hers, and he noticed that, although delicate, they trembled slightly. "How can I thank you for saving not only my life, but also that of my little Benjamin?" His voice choked at the mention of the baby's name. "Mrs. Torres, Laura, please," she corrected gently. "Laura," Gabriel continued. "Anyone would have done the same." Eduardo, who was watching the scene leaning against the wall, shook his head. "No, Gabriel, not everyone would have risked their life like that. You mentioned that you needed help. Please tell us." Gabriel took a deep breath, gathering his courage. The words he spoke next could change the fate of his family. "My father has been in hospital for 3 months," he began, his voice low but firm. "Pancreatic cancer. The doctors say there's an experimental treatment that could help him, but..." He hesitated, the weight of the situation pressing down on his chest. "We can't afford it. My mother works 2 jobs. I fish when I can, but we can barely cover basic expenses and look after my younger siblings." Laura squeezed his hand tighter as Eduardo approached, his countenance changing from curiosity to understanding. "As well as treatment," Gabriel continued. "I need a better job, something that will allow me to really help my family. I'm not asking for charity, Mr. Torres. I can work hard, learn anything. I just need an opportunity." The silence that followed was interrupted only by the soft sound of the heart monitor. Eduardo and Laura exchanged a meaningful look before he spoke. "Gabriel, my company, Torres Enterprises, is always looking for talented young people. Someone with your courage and integrity would be an excellent addition to our team. As for your father's treatment..." Eduardo paused, consulting Laura with his gaze. She nodded subtly. "Consider that settled. I'll arrange for him to be transferred to this hospital later today." The world seemed to spin around Gabriel. "Mr. Torres, I don't know if I can..." "You can and you must," Laura interrupted firmly. "You saved 2 lives yesterday. Let us help you save 1 too." The tears Gabriel had been holding back finally escaped. "Thank you," was all he managed to say. "We'll start preparations tomorrow," Eduardo declared. "But first, I need you to understand something, Gabriel. I'm not just offering this out of gratitude. I saw something in you today. Courage, determination, character. These are qualities I look for in my employees." At that moment, a nurse came in to check Laura's vital signs, and Gabriel took the opportunity to pull himself together. As he watched the movement in the room, he thought of his mother, Helena, who hadn't smiled for months, of Miguel and Sofia, who were trying to be strong despite everything, and of his father, Ricardo, who was fighting bravely against the disease. "I need to tell my family," he finally said. "Of course," Eduardo replied, handing him a card. "My personal number is there. Call me as soon as you can so we can work out the details." On leaving the hospital, Gabriel stopped for a moment to watch the sunset. The storm had passed, leaving the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was as if nature was reflecting the hope that was now welling up in his heart. On the bus on the way home, he reread Eduardo's card several times, still trying to process everything that had happened. The vehicle bounced through the city's neighborhoods, passing from the luxury of the medical center to the simpler streets of her neighborhood. When he got off at the stop near his house, Gabriel spotted Miguel and Sofia playing in the small front garden. When they saw him, they ran towards him. "Gabby, Mom is so worried," Sofia exclaimed, clinging to his waist. "Where were you? Why are you all wet?" Miguel asked, his curious eyes scanning his older brother. Gabriel hugged them both, his heart overflowing with love and hope. "Come on, he said, leading them inside. I have an incredible story to tell you and Mom. As he walked home with his brothers, Gabriel knew that his life was about to change drastically. The challenge ahead was daunting, but for the first time in a long time, he felt that the future held more than just difficulties. It held possibilities. The Martinez's small house had never seemed so silent as when Gabriel finished recounting the day's events. Helena, his mother, sat on the worn-out kitchen chair, her hands trembling over her face, tears silently running down her fingers. Miguel and Sofia, sitting on the floor at her feet, looked at their older brother as if he had just told them a superhero story. "Mijo," Helena finally spoke, her voice laced with the Mexican accent that intensified when she was emotional. "Are you sure that's not too much kindness to accept?" Gabriel knelt down in front of his mother, holding her calloused hands from years of work as a cleaner. "Mama, it's not charity. Mr. Torres offered me a real job, and as for Dad," he hesitated, taking a deep breath. "It's our chance to give him the treatment he needs." The phone rang, breaking the moment of emotion. It was from the hospital where Ricardo was staying. Helena answered with trembling hands, fearing bad news as she always did. Her eyes widened as she listened. Sí, I understand," she replied, alternating between English and Spanish as she did when she was nervous. "Gracias." When she hung up, she turned to her children with an astonished expression. It was the hospital. They said Dad would be transferred to Memorial Hospital tomorrow. All the expenses have already been approved, including the experimental treatment. His voice faltered. "It's real, mijo. It's really real." Gabriel hugged his mother, feeling the weight of the last few months dissolve into tears of relief. Sofia and Miguel joined in the embrace, forming a knot of arms and relieved sobs. The next morning, Gabriel woke up before sunrise, a habit acquired from years of fishing with his father. He put on his best shirt, a light blue piece he saved for special occasions, and the only dress pants he owned, a gift from his high school graduation. In the cracked mirror of the small bathroom, she tried to tame the dark, wavy hair that insisted on falling over her eyes. His hands, marked by calluses and small scars from working at sea, looked strange against the thin fabric of his shirt. "You look very handsome," Helena said, appearing in the bathroom doorway. In her hands, she held a navy blue tie. "It was your father's. He would have wanted you to wear it." With delicate fingers, she adjusted the tie around her son's neck, her eyes shining with restrained tears. "Your father always said you were born for big things, mijo, that you had his intelligence and my strength." The road to Torres Enterprises was a journey between two worlds. The bus crossed the city, leaving behind the simple neighborhood where he lived and entering the financial district, with its mirrored skyscrapers that seemed to touch the sky. The company building was an imposing glass and steel structure that rose 40 stories above the ground. In the marble lobby, Gabriel felt tiny, conscious of every step he took on the polished floor. "Gabriel Martinez," a female voice called out. An elegant woman, who introduced herself as Rebecca Collins, Director of Human Resources, led him to her office on the 35th floor. "Mr. Torres brought me up to speed," she said, indicating a chair. "Your story is extraordinary, Gabriel, but I need to be clear. This is not a charity position. You'll have to prove your worth like any other employee." "That's all I ask, Mrs. Collins," Gabriel replied firmly. The next 2 hours were filled with forms, explanations of benefits and company policies. Gabriel would be integrated into the trainee program, starting in the logistics department, a choice Eduardo had made personally, considering his practical experience with shipping. "Your hours will be from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Rebecca explained. "The evenings will be reserved for the business administration course at the State University. Yes, the company will pay for your studies," she added, noticing his surprised expression. When the meeting was over, Rebecca took him to see her work area. On the way, they passed dozens of employees in executive suits, some casting curious glances in their direction. "Martinez," a familiar voice called out. Eduardo Torres approached from the corridor, his impeccable suit contrasting with his warm smile. "How was the first part of the day?" "Very well, Mr. Torres." Eduardo, please, we're colleagues now." He turned to Rebecca. "How did he do?" "Impressively well," she replied with a small smile. "I think you made an excellent choice, Eduardo." Later, during his lunch break, Gabriel found a moment to call his mother. Ricardo had already been transferred to the new hospital. and the doctors were optimistic about the experimental treatment. Sitting on a bench in the square in front of the building, Gabriel watched the executives hurry past with their takeaway coffees and leather briefcases, a completely different world from his own, but one he was determined to adapt to. His phone vibrated with a message from Laura. "How's the first day going?" "Benjamin and I are rooting for you." Gabriel smiled, typing a sincere reply. As he put his phone away, he noticed his reflection in a store window. The young fisherman was still there, in the calluses on his hands and the determined glint in his eyes. But now there was something else, a spark of hope and possibility that wasn't there before. The midday sun was shining over the city, and Gabriel Martinez, with his father's tie around his neck and renewed dreams in his heart, took a deep breath before returning to work. His new journey was just beginning. 2 weeks had passed since Gabriel started his job at Torres Enterprises, and each day brought new challenges. That Monday morning, he stared intently at his computer screen, trying to decipher a complex spreadsheet on port logistics. The numbers danced before his tired eyes. He had studied late the night before, preparing for his first day at university. "Hey, Martinez!" A sharp voice interrupted his concentration. Alexander Pierce, supervisor of the logistics department, was approaching with his usual disdainful expression. "Where's the report I asked for on Friday?" "It's almost ready, Mr. Pierce," Gabriel replied, keeping his voice steady despite his nervousness. "I just need to check some data from the Port of Oakland." "Almost ready isn't ready," Pierce retorted, leaning over Gabriel's desk. "Maybe you should spend less time being Torres' protege and more time actually learning your job." The comment provoked discreet giggles from some of his close colleagues. Gabriel felt his face burn, but remained composed, remembering his mother's words. "La dignidad, mijo. Never let them take away your dignity." "The report will be on your desk in an hour, Mr. Pierce," he assured him, turning his attention back to the screen. As soon as Pierce walked away, Olivia Chen, a senior analyst at the next desk, leaned towards him. "Don't let him intimidate you," she whispered. "Pierce is jealous because Eduardo has taken a special interest in your progress." Gabriel nodded gratefully, but Pierce's words bothered him. Since his first day, he had faced cross looks and veiled comments about how he had gotten the job. The fact that Eduardo occasionally stopped by his desk to check on his progress only fueled the rumors. During lunch, sitting alone in the company cafeteria, Gabriel took the opportunity to call the hospital. His father's experimental treatment was showing promising results, but Ricardo was still very weak. "Papa, how are you feeling today?" he asked, alternating naturally between English and Spanish. "Mejor, mijo," Ricardo's weak voice replied. "The doctors say the numbers are improving, but tell me, how's work?" Gabriel hesitated, not wanting to worry his father. "I'm learning a lot," he replied diplomatically. "Gabriel," his father said, using that tone he always saw through his evasions. "Remember what I used to teach you when you were little and the sea was rough, that turbulent waters make the sailor stronger." "Exactly. At sea or in business, son, storms always pass. The important thing is to stay on course." The conversation with his father strengthened his spirit. He returned to work with renewed determination, immersing himself in the figures that had once seemed so daunting. The hours passed quickly as he finalized the report, checking every detail meticulously. At 4:45 p.m., Gabriel walked into Pierce's office and report in hand. To his surprise, Eduardo Torres was there, apparently in the middle of a meeting. "Ah, Gabriel," Eduardo smiled. "Pierce was just telling me about the Port of Oakland report. Can I take a look?" Gabriel handed over the document, his heart racing as Eduardo and Pierce examined the pages. The silence seemed interminable. "Impressive," Eduardo finally declared, "especially this analysis on optimizing navigation routes. Very practical, almost as if it had been done by someone who really knows the sea." Pierce seemed to have swallowed something bitter. "Yes, well, it's adequate. More than adequate," Eduardo corrected. "Gabriel, I'd like you to present these suggestions at the board meeting tomorrow." "Me?" Gabriel asked, surprised. "But sir, Eduardo, I never—" "Sometimes we need different perspectives," Eduardo interrupted gently. "Your experience as a fisherman brings a practical knowledge that our traditional analysts don't have." Leaving Pierce's office, Gabriel felt simultaneously elated and terrified. A presentation to the board. His stomach churned at the thought. On the subway on his way to the university, he mentally reviewed his knowledge of navigation tides and sea routes. He knew it like the back of his hand. It was the world he had grown up in. But turning this knowledge into a corporate presentation was a completely new challenge. The evening at university passed like a blur. While his classmates discussed management theories, Gabriel's mind was on the waves, currents and winds he had learned to read as a child. Back at home, long after midnight, he found his mother awake, waiting with a cup of tea. "I saw your bedroom light on," Helena said softly. "Problems at work, mijo." Gabriel told her about his day, about Pierce, about the imminent presentation. Helena listened attentively, her hands wrapping around the hot cup. "Do you know what your father used to say when you were little and afraid of the sea?" she asked. "That turbulent waters make the sailor stronger." Gabriel smiled, remembering the conversation earlier. "No," Helena corrected with a smile. "He said that you were born with salt in your blood and stars in your eyes, that you would find your way through any storm." That night, Gabriel worked on his presentation until dawn, mixing corporate graphics with the deep knowledge he carried in his blood. When he finally went to bed, the sun was already beginning to tint the horizon pink. Tomorrow he would face his first big test at Torres Enterprises. But as his father always said, storms pass. The important thing is to stay on course. The meeting room on the 40th floor of Torres Enterprises emanated power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while an imposing mahogany table dominated the room. Gabriel nervously adjusted his tie, the same one that had belonged to his father, as he watched the executives enter, all in their impeccable suits and serious expressions. Laura Torres, surprisingly, was among them. Her presence, even with her advanced pregnancy, showed how important the presentation was. She offered Gabriel an encouraging smile, which he returned shyly as he organized his notes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Eduardo began the meeting. "Today we will discuss a new proposal for optimizing our maritime routes. Gabriel Martinez, our newest analyst, will present his findings." Pierce, sitting near the door, crossed his arms with a skeptical expression. Gabriel took a deep breath, remembering his mother's words the night before. With a click of the remote control, he began his presentation. "As many of you know, our port operations have been facing significant delays," he began, his voice initially hesitant but gaining strength. "But what few realize is that we are ignoring one of the most valuable resources at our disposal, the sea itself." For the next 20 minutes, Gabriel led the board through a detailed analysis that mixed corporate data with practical knowledge. He explained how sea currents, when properly harnessed, could significantly reduce fuel consumption. He demonstrated how knowledge of the tides could optimize arrival and departure times. "Look at this pattern," he pointed to a graph. "Our ships often face adverse currents here and here. A fisherman would never choose these routes. With small adjustments to schedules and routes, we can save up to 22% on fuel and reduce travel time by 15%. The room, which had initially emanated skepticism, was now completely silent. Even Pierce had uncrossed his arms, leaning forward with interest. "But the most important thing," Gabriel continued, his confidence growing, "is that these changes don't require significant investment. We just need to work in harmony with the sea, not against it." When he finished, there was a moment of silence before the questions began. To his surprise, Gabriel found that he could answer them naturally, drawing on years of practical experience. "Impressive," commented Victoria Blackwood, finance director. "How long did it take you to develop this analysis?" "Actually," Gabriel replied honestly, "these observations are the result of a lifetime at sea. I just translated them into corporate language." Eduardo smiled, clearly pleased. "I think we all agree that this is a project that deserves immediate implementation. Gabriel, I'd like you to lead the pilot phase." Pierce stood up abruptly. "With all due respect, Eduardo, he's only a trainee. He has no experience in project management, but he has experience where it matters most," Laura interjected, her voice soft but firm. At sea, the meeting ended with polite applause and many handshakes. As the executives left, Gabriel remained in the room, organizing his materials, still processing what had happened. "Gabriel," Laura called out to him, staying behind. "I have something for you." She handed over a small package. Inside was an old compass, beautifully preserved. "It was my grandfather's," she explained. "He was also a man of the sea. I think he'd like you to have it." Gabriel held the instrument reverently. Mrs. Torres. Laura, I can't accept. Yes, you can, she smiled, stroking his belly. Consider it a gift from Benjamin, too. After all, if it wasn't for you. That afternoon, Gabriel paid a surprise visit to the hospital. He found his father sitting on the bed, looking better than he had in weeks. Papa, he said, showing the compass. Today I learned that sometimes we need different instruments to navigate uncharted waters. Ricardo smiled, recognizing the wisdom in his son's words. And how was the presentation? Gabriel told them about the meeting, about the executives' initial doubts, about how his knowledge of the sea had opened up new horizons. You know, mijo, Ricardo said, holding his son's hand. When you were little and accompanied me on the boat, I always knew that you could see beyond the waves. You weren't just learning to fish, you were learning to read the world. On the way to the university that evening, Gabriel held the compass in his pocket. The instrument, although old, pointed steadily north, just as his heart now pointed to a future that was beginning to take shape. At his desk in the classroom, while other students discussed management theories, Gabriel smiled to himself. Perhaps the secret was not to try to fit completely into the corporate world, but to bring a bit of the sea, its wisdom, its mysteries, its lessons, into such a different environment. The compass in his pocket was more than a gift. It was a reminder that all seas, even the most unknown, could be navigated with the right guidance. The implementation of the pilot project completely transformed Gabriel's routine. His small cubicle was replaced by a shared room on the 38th floor, overlooking the port. On his desk, in addition to the corporate computer, Laura's compass took pride of place, serving as a constant reminder of her journey. That Thursday morning, while reviewing preliminary reports, an unusual movement caught her eye. Pierce was talking quietly to two executives Gabriel didn't recognize, casting furtive glances in his direction. You need to keep an eye out, Olivia commented over breakfast. Pierce has scheduled secret meetings with Blackwood Maritime. The competitor? Gabriel asked, feeling a tightness in his stomach. Exactly. And it's no coincidence that this is happening just as your project is about to be implemented. Gabriel's concern increased when, that afternoon, he discovered that some crucial data had disappeared from his computer. Backups that were supposed to be on the company's server were also inaccessible. It must be a technical problem, the IT technician commented, without much interest. Sometimes that happens. Gabriel knew it was no coincidence. Years at sea had taught him to recognize signs of a storm even before the clouds appeared. He decided to work late, recovering the lost data and creating backup copies on his personal USB stick. The office was practically empty when he heard voices coming from Pierce's office. The door was ajar, and against his better judgment, Gabriel approached silently. The boy is a bigger problem than we imagined. Pierce's voice sounded irritated. If this project is successful, Eduardo will want to implement it throughout the fleet, and that would directly affect our interests. An unfamiliar female voice replied. Blackwood Maritime can't afford to lose any more contracts to Torres Enterprises. Gabriel felt his blood run cold. He was about to walk away when his cell phone vibrated loudly in his pocket. The voices in the room immediately fell silent. Is anyone there? Pierce called out. Gabriel moved quickly towards the elevator, his heart beating fast. On the way home, his mind was working frantically. Pierce was clearly involved with the competition, sabotaging the project from the inside. But how to prove it? At home, he found Miguel still awake, studying for a math test. Gabi, you look worried, his younger brother commented. Gabriel sat down next to him, looking at the algebra exercises. Sometimes, bro, people aren't who they seem, like in those pirate stories Dad used to tell, Miguel asked with a smile. The mention of pirates sparked an idea in Gabriel's mind. His father always said that the real dangers at sea rarely came from storms. They came from silent betrayals and seemingly calm waters. The next morning, Gabriel arrived at the office early. With Olivia's help, he began to discreetly map all the accesses to the project files, creating a digital trail of modifications and deletions. Look at this. Olivia pointed at the screen. All the unauthorized accesses happened after business hours, using Pierce's password. We need more, Gabriel replied, remembering the voices he had heard. Something to prove the connection with Blackwood. The opportunity arose unexpectedly during lunch. Laura Torres, who occasionally had lunch in the company cafeteria, approached Gabriel's table. How's the project going? She asked, sitting down with some difficulty due to her advanced pregnancy. Gabriel hesitated for a moment before deciding to confide in her. He told her about his suspicions, the secret meetings, the missing data. Laura listened attentively, her expression changing from concern to determination. "That explains a few things," she finally said. Eduardo commented on suspicious proposals from Blackwood Maritime coming directly to the board. "I don't have any hard evidence," Gabriel admitted. "Yet," Laura corrected. "But we'll get it." With Laura's discreet help, Gabriel and Olivia began a meticulous investigation. Every email, every access record, every modification to the system was documented. As his father had taught him about night navigation, sometimes you had to trust your instruments more than your eyes. A week later, during a project update presentation, Gabriel noticed Pierce typing furiously on his cell phone. Using a network monitoring program that Olivia had installed, they managed to intercept an email being sent to a Blackwood Maritime domain containing confidential project information. "We have our proof," Olivia whispered triumphantly. Gabriel gathered all the documentation and, with his heart in his throat, requested an urgent meeting with Eduardo. To his surprise, Laura was also present. "This is more serious than we imagined," Eduardo commented after examining the evidence. "Pierce isn't just leaking information, he's actively sabotaging our project in favor of the competition." "What happens now?" Gabriel asked. "Now," Laura replied with a determined smile. "We're going to show that at Torres Enterprises, we play fair." The board meeting was called for the following morning. Pierce entered the room with his usual confidence, which quickly dissipated when he saw the evidence being presented on the screen. "This is ridiculous," he tried to argue. "It's obvious that the kid faked this evidence because he can't handle a little pressure." "Digital records don't lie, Mr. Pierce," Eduardo replied coldly. "Your password was used to access and modify confidential documents, which subsequently appeared on Blackwood Maritime's servers." Pierce's face paled when Eduardo mentioned the competing company. Within hours, he was escorted out of the building, and a formal investigation was launched. That evening, visiting his father in hospital, Gabriel told him about the day's events. "You know, Papa, you always said that the sea teaches you more than sailing." Ricardo smiled. His color was better, and the doctors were optimistic about his response to treatment. "The sea teaches us about life, mijo, about honesty, courage, and patience." Gabriel touched the compass in his pocket, thinking about how his life had changed over the last few months. From fisherman to executive, from rescuer to investigator, each role requiring different kinds of courage, and about trusting the right instruments, he added, smiling at his father. "Si," Ricardo agreed. "But the most important instrument will always be your heart, mijo, and yours has never failed to point north." Autumn was coming to an end, bringing with it colder winds and an accelerated pace at Torres Enterprises. With Pierce's departure, Gabriel was officially promoted to Maritime Operations Manager, a position created especially for him. His new office, although modest, had a privileged view of the port, a constant reminder of where his journey had begun. That November morning, while organizing his new desk, Gabriel received an urgent message from Laura. Benjamin had decided to arrive early and she was on her way to the hospital. The message made his heart race. It was as if a cycle was completing itself. "Go," Olivia, now his direct assistant, insisted. "I'll take care of things around here." At the hospital, Gabriel found Eduardo walking nervously down the maternity corridor. The ever-composed businessman looked completely vulnerable. "Gabriel," he exclaimed when he saw him, "how nice of you to come. Laura, she asked for you." Inside the room, Laura was breathing heavily between contractions. When she saw Gabriel, she stretched out her hand towards him. "Our savior," she smiled faintly. "It looks like Benjamin chose a significant day to be born." "Significant?" Gabriel asked, holding out his hand. "Exactly 3 months since that day on the shore," Eduardo explained, his voice breaking. "The day you saved our lives." The next few hours were intense. Gabriel alternated between keeping Eduardo company in the corridor and visiting Laura briefly. In between visits to the room, he took the opportunity to call his family. "Mama, could you bring Papa to meet the baby? The doctors say he's strong enough for a short visit." Helena agreed with emotion. The experimental treatment was working better than expected, and Ricardo was already able to go for short walks. Towards evening, Benjamin's loud cries echoed down the corridor. Gabriel, who was standing outside with his father in a wheelchair and his mother felt tears well up in his eyes. "Life," Ricardo murmured, squeezing his son's hand. "Life always finds a way." When they were finally able to enter the room, Laura was beaming, holding a small package in her arms. Eduardo, his eyes watering, made sure that Gabriel was the first to hold the baby after his parents. "Benjamin Martinez Torres," Laura announced softly. Gabriel looked up in surprise. "Martinez, your name deserves to be part of his story," Eduardo explained. "Not only did you save their lives, but you also changed our company, our way of seeing the world." Benjamin wriggled in Gabriel's arms, briefly opening his little eyes. Helena, who was watching the scene, whispered an ancient prayer in Spanish, while Ricardo smiled proudly from his wheelchair. Back at the office the next day, Gabriel found a new energy in the room. The news of Benjamin's birth had spread, and along with it, a renewed sense of purpose. "Meeting in 5 minutes," Olivia announced, entering her office. "The board wants to discuss the expansion of the project." In the meeting room, Gabriel presented the preliminary results of the implementation. The figures were impressive. Fuel savings 25% higher than expected, a significant reduction in travel times, and a notable increase in crew satisfaction. "But the most important thing," Gabriel concluded, "is that we're just getting started. There is so much traditional knowledge about the sea that can be applied to modern business." Victoria Blackwood, who after the incident with Pierce had become one of his biggest supporters, stood up to make an announcement. "The board has approved the creation of a new program," she declared. "The Torres-Martinez Maritime Program. We want to create a bridge between the traditional knowledge of the men of the sea and modern technology." Gabriel felt the weight of those words. It wasn't just a program, it was a recognition that sometimes the best innovations come from unexpected places. That evening, visiting his father in hospital for his treatment session, Gabriel shared the news. "Did you see that, Papa? All those years at sea? They weren't just about fishing," Ricardo added with a smile. "They were about understanding nature, respecting its rhythms, learning its lessons." Miguel and Sofia, who had come along, listened fascinated. For them, their older brother had become a kind of hero, not just for the dramatic rescue, but for showing that it was possible to build bridges between different worlds. "Gabby," Sofia asked, "are you still going fishing with us when Dad gets better?" "Of course, Pequeña," Gabriel replied, ruffling his sister's hair. "The sea will always be part of who I am." Later, in his new apartment, a gift he had given himself with his first bonus, Gabriel watched the lights of the port through the window. Laura's compass rested on his desk, along with a recent photo of Benjamin. His phone vibrated with a message from Eduardo. "Laura and Benjamin are going home tomorrow. We'd like you to join us for dinner at the weekend." "Family is family," Gabriel smiled, thinking about how life had mysterious ways of bringing people and destinies together. As his father always said, the sea knows no borders, only infinite horizons of possibilities. The success of the Torres-Martinez Maritime Program had turned Gabriel into a prominent figure in the maritime sector. 6 months after it began, companies all over the country were looking to implement similar methodologies. However, with visibility came new challenges and responsibilities that would test his ability to navigate even deeper waters. One particularly hectic morning, Olivia burst into his office with a worried expression. "Gabriel, you need to see this," she said, holding out the tablet with the maritime news. The headline made her heart squeeze. "Former Torres Enterprises executive accuses company of intellectual property theft." The article, signed by a respected financial newspaper, carried serious accusations from Pierce, claiming that Gabriel's revolutionary program was actually based on confidential research by Blackwood Maritime. "He's lying," Gabriel muttered, but felt a chill run down his spine as he continued reading. Pierce had presented documents that, although manipulated, seemed convincing at first glance. His phone rang. It was Eduardo. "Emergency meeting in 15 minutes. Bring everything you have on the development of the program." On the way to the meeting room, Gabriel stopped briefly in his office to pick up his old briefcase, the one that contained his first drafts, made when he was still a fisherman, long before he met Torres Enterprises. The meeting room was tense. Eduardo, normally calm, was showing clear signs of worry. Victoria Blackwood was on the phone with the company's lawyers, while other executives whispered in small groups. "The charges are serious," Eduardo began as soon as everyone was seated. "Pierce is claiming that he had access to confidential documents from Blackwood Maritime, which proved that they had been developing a similar system for years. "But that's impossible," Gabriel protested, opening his old briefcase. "These ideas came from my experiences at sea, from my father's lessons." "We believe you, Gabriel," Laura intervened, entering the room with Benjamin in her arms. "But we need concrete proof." The baby, now 6 months old, smiled when he saw Gabriel, stretching out his little arms towards him. This innocent gesture brought sudden clarity to his thoughts. "Actually," Gabriel said, picking up his oldest notebook, "I have something better than proof. I have the whole story." On the yellowed, seawater-stained pages, Gabriel had documented years of observations about currents, winds, and sea routes. There were detailed diagrams, rudimentary calculations, and notes in Spanish made by his father. "This is from when I was 15, he explained, showing a specific page. "My father and I started to develop a system to save fuel based on natural currents. We couldn't afford big boat and so we had to be efficient." Laura, who was now cradling a sleepy Benjamin, smiled. "That's why the program works so well. It wasn't created in a boardroom. It was born at sea." The legal team, which had arrived during Gabriel's presentation, carefully examined the documents, the dates, the natural wear and tear of the paper, the different handwriting over the years. Everything indicated the authenticity of the material. "That's excellent," commented the lead lawyer. "But we need more. Mr. Martinez, would your father be willing to testify about the development of these techniques?" Gabriel felt a tightness in his chest. Ricardo was still undergoing treatment, although he was responding well. "I'll talk to him and the doctors." That evening, at the hospital, Gabriel explained the situation to his parents. Ricardo, although still weak, sat up straighter in bed. "Mijo, those techniques weren't invented by us," he said with a wise smile. "They've been passed down through generations of fishermen. Mi padre me enseñó as your grandfather taught him." "That's exactly it," Gabriel exclaimed, an idea taking shape. "It's nobody's intellectual property because it's traditional knowledge." Over the next few days, Gabriel and his team worked tirelessly. They contacted old fishing communities, documented similar techniques being used by different groups along the coast, and gathered testimonials from veterans of the sea. A week later, Torres Enterprises held a press conference. Gabriel, wearing a navy blue suit that resembled the color of the ocean, stood next to Eduardo and Laura. In the front row, in his wheelchair but with a proud smile, was Ricardo, accompanied by Helena, Miguel, and Sofia. "The Torres Martinez Maritime Program," Gabriel began, his voice firm, "is not a corporate invention. It's a tribute to the ancestral knowledge of the men and women of the sea. A knowledge that belongs to everyone and that now, thanks to Torres Enterprises, can benefit the entire maritime industry." The presentation included videos of old fishermen sharing similar techniques, historical documents from different coastal communities, and a detailed analysis showing how the program had only systematized and modernized centuries-old practices. The final blow came when Ricardo, with Helena's help, stood up to share his own experiences. His voice, although soft, carried the weight of truth and tradition. The response was immediate. Pierce's accusations crumbled, and the press that had previously questioned the program now celebrated its authentic origins and its connection to traditional communities. Later, during a small celebration at the Torres home, Benjamin played on Ricardo's lap while Gabriel watched the scene with emotion. "You know, son," Ricardo said softly, "sometimes the worst storms bring the best lessons." "Like which one, Papa?" "Like the importance of honoring our roots," he replied, looking meaningfully at Benjamin. "And to pass on what we've learned?" Gabriel nodded, realizing that his real mission went beyond modernizing navigation techniques. It was about building bridges between old and new, between tradition and innovation, between different worlds that, in the end, were part of the same ocean of possibilities. Benjamin's first birthday was approaching, coinciding with a crucial phase of the Torres Martinez Maritime Program. The successful implementation had attracted international attention, and Gabriel was preparing to present the project at a global maritime logistics conference in Singapore. However, an unexpected phone call would change his plans. "Señor Martinez?" an unfamiliar voice asked on the other end of the line. "This is your father's medical team. There's been a complication." The world seemed to freeze. Gabriel let the documents he was reviewing fall onto the table, his mind instantly going back to that rainy afternoon when it all began. "How serious is it?" he managed to ask. The experimental treatment has had an unexpected side effect. We need to perform an urgent intervention, but..." The voice hesitated. "The insurance doesn't cover this particular procedure." Gabriel felt the familiar weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Even with his new salary and position, an experimental procedure of this size would represent a significant financial challenge. "I'll do whatever it takes," he replied firmly. When he hung up, he found Laura standing outside his office, Benjamin in her arms. The little boy, almost a year old, had his mother's watchful eyes on him and smiled at the sight of Gabriel. "Problems?" Laura asked, noticing his expression. Gabriel explained the situation, aware of the upcoming conflict. The conference in Singapore was crucial for the international expansion of the program, but his father— "Go take care of your father," Laura said without hesitation. "Eduardo and I can present the project in Singapore. But Laura, the program is based on traditional knowledge. I need to be there to explain—" "Gabriel," she interrupted gently, "you taught us something much more important than sea routes. You taught us about family. Now it's time to honor that lesson." That evening, in his apartment, Gabriel was organizing documents when he received a surprise visit. Eduardo Torres was at his door, carrying an old folder. "I found these in the company archives," he said, handing Gabriel the folder. "These are the original records of your contract, including the family health insurance." Gabriel opened the folder, confused. "If you read it carefully," Eduardo continued with a small smile, "you'll see that your father's treatment is actually covered. There was just a misinterpretation." "Eduardo, I don't know how to thank you." "Don't say thank you," Eduardo interrupted. "Just promise that you'll take care of your father like you took care of my family." The next few days were intense. While Eduardo and Laura traveled to Singapore, Gabriel divided his time between the hospital and the office, coordinating the program's operations remotely. At the hospital, Ricardo faced the new procedure with the same courage he had always shown at sea. Helena rarely left his side, praying softly in Spanish. "Papa," Gabriel said one night, while the doctors were adjusting the equipment, "remember when you taught me to sail at night?" Ricardo smiled faintly. "My son, when you can't see the horizon, trust the stars," Gabriel added. "They always guide us home." Miguel and Sofia visited whenever they could after school, bringing drawings and stories to cheer up their father. The Martinez family was once again facing a storm together. A week after the procedure, while Gabriel was working on his laptop in the hospital room, he received a video call from Singapore. Laura and Eduardo were overjoyed. "The program was an absolute success," Laura exclaimed. "Several international companies want to implement it immediately. But the best thing," Eduardo added, "was when we showed the video you recorded explaining the origins of traditional knowledge. Gabriel, you managed to touch their hearts even though you were on the other side of the world." Ricardo, who was awake and listening to the conversation, smiled proudly. "Did you see that, my son?" he said after the call ended. "Sometimes we need to trust that others can navigate for us, while we take care of what's truly important." The results of the new procedure began to appear gradually. Color returned to Ricardo's face, and his strength increased day by day. The doctors were optimistic. One particularly significant afternoon, Gabriel arrived at the hospital to find his father sitting in an armchair, no longer connected to the devices. "Surprise!" Helena exclaimed, tears of joy in her eyes. "The doctors say I can go home in a few days," Ricardo announced, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. Gabriel sat down next to his father, holding his hand, calloused from years at sea. "You know, Papa, I've learned something in these last few months." "What, my son?" "That no matter how much success we achieve, our compass must always point home." Ricardo squeezed his son's hand. "And yours always has, Gabriel, even when the winds blew in the other direction." That evening, Gabriel organized a small celebration in his apartment. Eduardo and Laura, newly arrived from Singapore, brought Benjamin. Helena prepared traditional Mexican dishes, while Miguel and Sofia decorated the room with drawings of boats and stars. Watching his extended family gather, the Martinezes and the Torres sharing stories and laughter, Gabriel understood that his true wealth didn't lie in professional success or corporate achievements. It was there, in the deep waters of family love, where the strongest currents are those that hold hearts together, even when the storm threatens to separate them. Benjamin, on the lap of the now recovered Ricardo, played with the old compass, his little finger always pointing north, as if he instinctively understood the importance of always knowing the way home. A year had passed since Ricardo's recovery. Torres Enterprises had become the world leader in sustainable maritime logistics, and the Torres-Martinez program was being studied at universities around the world. However, for Gabriel, the greatest achievement was seeing his father back at the helm of his small fishing boat on Sundays. On that special Sunday morning, 3 generations of men sailed together, Ricardo at the helm, Gabriel adjusting the sails, and little Benjamin, now 2 years old, held in his father's lap, his eyes shining with the same fascination for the sea that Gabriel had at his age. "Look, Daddy," Benjamin pointed to a group of dolphins following the boat. "You see, my son?" Ricardo smiled at Gabriel. "He's got the sea in his blood, just like you." The sun was rising over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was the same scenery Gabriel had contemplated thousands of times before, but now it seemed different, richer, more meaningful. "Gabriel!" a familiar voice called out. It was Eduardo on his yacht, approaching with Laura. It was the first time they would be taking part in the Martinez's traditional Sunday fishing trip. As the 2 boats approached, Benjamin jumped up and down excitedly. "Uncle Eduardo, Aunt Laura." The Torres family had become a natural extension of the Martinez family. Celebrations were shared, worries divided, and joys multiplied. "I have news," Eduardo announced as he helped Laura over to Gabriel's boat. "The council has unanimously approved our new initiative." Gabriel knew what he was talking about. For months they had been working on a project to create a navigation school that combined traditional knowledge with modern technology. "The Torres Martinez Maritime School will open next semester," Laura added, her eyes shining. "And we want you, Ricardo, to be our main teacher of traditional navigation." Ricardo, who was still holding the tiller, looked at Gabriel in surprise. "Me? But who better than you, Dad?" Gabriel smiled. "You don't just know the sea. You understand its language. You respect its mysteries." Benjamin, who had settled into his grandfather's lap, played with the old compass that now rarely left the boat. "Is Grandpa going to teach everyone to sail?" "Yes, my little one," Ricardo replied, his voice laced with emotion. "We're going to teach people to respect the sea as it deserves." The morning passed between stories and laughter. Eduardo, trying to fish for the first time, received patient lessons from Ricardo. Laura photographed everything, documenting these precious moments for posterity. When they returned to the port, they found Helena, Miguel, and Sofia organizing a picnic on the beach. The Sunday tradition had grown, embracing new people, new dreams. "You know," Gabriel said as they all settled down on the sand, "2 years ago, when I saved Laura and Benjamin in that storm, I thought I was just in the right place at the right time. But now I understand that the sea had bigger plans." "The sea always has bigger plans, my son," Ricardo nodded. "It doesn't just unite coastlines, it unites destinies." Eduardo raised his glass in a toast. "To the family, the one we were born into and the one we chose. And to the sea," Benjamin added precociously, making everyone laugh. As the sun began to set, Gabriel watched Benjamin playing in the sand with Miguel and Sofia. The boy was building little boats out of shells, already showing the same passion for the sea that ran through the Martinez's veins. Laura approached and sat down next to Gabriel. "Sometimes I wonder what our life would be like if you hadn't been on that beach that day." "The sea always takes people where they need to be," Gabriel replied, repeating one of his father's favorite sayings. On the horizon, a Torres Enterprises ship passed by, its route optimized by the principles Gabriel had learned in his childhood. It was a sight that perfectly symbolized the union between the traditional and the modern, between the past and the future. "Dad!" Benjamin called out, running towards him with a star-shaped shell. "Look what I found." Gabriel took his son in his arms, showing him how the star could guide them, just as his father had taught him so many years ago. It was his turn now to pass on not just the knowledge, but the love and respect for the sea that had shaped his life. Night fell softly on the beach, and the first stars began to appear in the sky. 2 families weird, united by fate and the sea, shared much more than a name in a global company. They shared a legacy of respect for tradition, and a vision of the future where the old and the new sailed together in harmony. And so, under the starry sky, with the sound of the waves as background music, the Martinez and Torres story continued to be written, page by page, wave by wave, in an endless book, like the ocean itself. Benjamin fell asleep in his father's arms, the little starfish still clutched in his hand, perhaps dreaming of the adventures that awaited him in the vast ocean of life. And Gabriel, looking at his son, knew that the real treasure was not in professional achievements or business success, but in the bonds that, like the sea currents, connected all generations in an eternal dance of love, respect, and tradition. The inauguration of the Torres Martinez Maritime School was scheduled for a clear spring morning. The new building, built on the seafront, blended modern architecture with traditional elements. Large windows allowed a panoramic view of the ocean, while old nautical charts and navigation instruments decorated the walls. Ricardo, wearing a navy blue shirt with the school's new logo, nervously adjusted his tie as he watched the crowd gather for the opening ceremony. "Nervous, Dad?" Gabriel asked, putting his hand on Ricardo's shoulder. "A little, my son," he replied with a shy smile. "I never thought I'd be here, about to teach at such an important school." Benjamin, now almost 3, ran around the main hall, his natural curiosity leading him to touch every nautical instrument on display. Laura followed him closely, her belly already showing signs of her second pregnancy. "Careful, little sailor," Eduardo called, picking up his son before he knocked over an antique compass. The inauguration ceremony began with Eduardo Torres giving an emotional speech about the importance of preserving traditional maritime knowledge. Gabriel then took to the stage. "3 years ago, I was just a fisherman," he began, his voice firm. "Today, I stand before you not only as an executive of Torres Enterprises, but as someone who has learned that true progress does not lie in abandoning the past, but in building bridges between the old and the new." In the front rows, Helena cried silently, while Miguel and Sofia, now teenagers, smiled proudly. The whole family had grown together with Gabriel's success. Ricardo was the last to speak. With simple but profound words, he shared stories of his years at sea, the lessons he learned in storms, and the importance of respecting maritime traditions. The sea, he concluded, doesn't distinguish between rich and poor, between traditional and modern. It teaches everyone equally, as long as we are willing to learn. After the ceremony, during the reception, Gabriel noticed Benjamin sitting on his grandfather's lap, both watching the ocean through the large windows. "What are you teaching him, Dad?" "I'm showing him how to read the clouds, my son," Ricardo replied. "Your boy has a natural gift for it, just like his father did," Laura commented, approaching with a hand on his belly. "And like this one will too." The news that it would be a girl had filled both families with joy. Maria, in honor of Laura's grandmother, who had also been a woman of the sea. That evening, after the festivities, Gabriel took his family for a special outing. His old fishing boat, now completely restored, was waiting at the pier. "I thought it would be fitting to end this special day in the place where it all began," he explained. As they sailed under the starry sky, Benjamin fell asleep in Laura's arms, and Eduardo steered the boat under Ricardo's close supervision. "You know, my son," Ricardo said softly to Gabriel, "when you were little, I dreamed of leaving you the fishing boat as your inheritance. I never imagined that you would turn that dream into something much bigger. The inheritance you left me, Dad, was much more valuable than a boat," Gabriel replied. "It was respect for the sea, the importance of family, the courage to face storms." A special glow crossed the sky, a shooting star. "Make a wish," Sophia exclaimed. But Gabriel, watching his family gathered on that boat, the Martinez and the Torres, the past and the future sailing together, knew he didn't need to ask for anything more. He had everything he had ever dreamed of and more. Benjamin woke up briefly, pointing sleepily at the horizon. "Daddy, look. The stars are dancing on the sea." It was the reflection of the lights in the sky on the calm water, creating a magical spectacle that seemed to celebrate that special moment. "Yes, my son," Gabriel smiled, hugging Laura. "The stars always dance for those who know how to appreciate the magic of the sea." The boat continued its peaceful journey under the night sky, carrying not just a family, but a living legacy of love, tradition, and respect for the sea. And in the calm waters of the bay, the reflections of the stars really did seem to dance, as if the ocean itself were blessing that union of lives, dreams, and destinies. The Torres Martinez Maritime School was more than just an educational project. It was a symbol of how respect for traditions could pave the way to the future. And there, on that boat under the stars, two families united by destiny continued to write their story, page by page, wave by wave, in the great book of the sea. 5 years have passed since the Torres Martinez Maritime School opened, What began as a local project had expanded to 3 continents, bringing traditional maritime knowledge to a new generation of navigators. One particularly significant morning, Gabriel watched the graduation of the first class from his office. Among the graduates, Miguel, now 18, stood out as one of the best students. "Are you proud of your brother?" Laura asked, entering the room with little Maria, now 4, bouncing along beside her. "Very," Gabriel smiled. "He's managed to perfectly combine traditional knowledge with new technologies." Benjamin, at the age of 7, already showed the same passion for the sea as his father and grandfather. Sitting at Gabriel's desk, he drew boats with surprising precision for his age. "Dad," Benjamin called out, "when can I have lessons with Grandpa Ricardo?" "Soon, my son," Gabriel replied, affectionately ruffling the boy's hair. "But first, you need to learn to swim better." The graduation ceremony took place in the school's amphitheater, overlooking the ocean. Ricardo, now a respected teacher, handed out the diplomas with obvious pride. When it was Miguel's turn, the two shared an emotional hug. "Your brother reminds me of you at his age," Helena commented to Gabriel, wiping away tears. "The same sparkle in your eyes when you talk about the sea." Eduardo, who now divides his time between Torres enterprises and social projects linked to the sea, took to the stage for the closing speech. "When we started this school," he said, "many doubted that traditional knowledge could have a place in the modern world. Today, our graduates prove that true innovation lies in honoring the past while building the future." After the ceremony, the Martinez and Torres families gathered for a special celebration on Ricardo's boat, now transformed into a school ship. "Do you remember the first time we sailed together?" Laura asked, watching Benjamin and Maria playing on the bow under Sophia's watchful eye. "How could I forget?" Eduardo smiled. "That's when we discovered that our family would be bigger than we imagined." Ricardo, at the helm, called Miguel to take over. The young man showed the same natural ability that Gabriel had at his age. "You know, my son," Ricardo said to Gabriel, "sometimes I wonder if it was all just a dream. A simple fisherman seeing his family transform not only their own lives, but those of so many other people." "It wasn't a dream, Dad," Gabriel replied. "It was the sea showing us its way as it always has." The afternoon progressed quietly, with stories being shared and plans being made. Miguel talked about his research project in oceanography, while Sophia, now studying design, showed his sketches for a new line of school uniforms. Benjamin and Maria ran up to Gabriel, excited. "Dad, look, a school of dolphins." Everyone moved closer to the edge to watch the animals playing in the crystal-clear water. It was a spectacle that never lost its magic, no matter how many times they saw it. "Grandpa," Benjamin called out to Ricardo, "tell me that story about when you and Dad saved an injured dolphin." Ricardo smiled, sitting down with the children. It was a story he loved to tell, not so much for the rescue itself, but for what it represented, the respect for marine life that had been passed down from generation to generation. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Gabriel reflected on the journey that had brought them there. From a simple act of courage during a storm, not just a business partnership had been born, but an extended family, united by love of the sea and respect for traditions. "What are you thinking about?" Laura asked, entwining her fingers in his. "About how the sea has its own plans for us," he replied. "Like the tides, which come and go, but always bring something new to the beach." Eduardo raised his glass in a toast. "To the Martinez-Torres family, and to the sea that brought us together. And to new horizons," Miguel added, still at the helm. The boat sailed smoothly on the calm waters of the bay, carrying not just 2 families, but a living legacy of love, respect, and tradition. Benjamin and Maria, the new generation, were already showing signs that they would continue this story, each in their own way. And so, under the starry sky that was beginning to reveal itself, Gabriel knew that this wasn't just a story of business or educational success. It was a story of how the sea, in its infinite wisdom, had woven different destinies into a single fabric, creating something stronger and more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. The cycle continued, like the tides, always moving, always bringing new possibilities, always connecting past and future in an eternal present of love, respect, and gratitude for the sea that had changed their lives forever. If you were in Gabriel's shoes, having to choose between attending the important conference in Singapore or staying to look after his sick father, what decision would you make? And how might it impact your professional and family future? Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.